Welcome back to r/LegalAdvice, where people ask questions, get advice, and we get satisfaction. If you are new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community, and without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. This one is titled Promised Bonus Next Week, Fired Today. Indiana, USA, so I was fired this morning with no reason given, never been written up or reprimanded. The company I work for probably has less than 50 employees total, but it is probably pretty close. My site has 2 full-time employees including myself, 1 part-time, and 2 illegally classified as 1099 subcontractors. I have worked there for several years. Next week we were due to have a huge inspection that has been scheduled for some time. Back in May I was promised a bonus of $3,200 if we passed this inspection with more than 90% or $2,000 if we scored more than 85%. We've been working for months to prepare this site to pass this inspection. The inspection is in less than a week. My husband thinks that they have broken some sort of labor law by firing me right before I should earn this bonus. I'm not so sure that there's any sort of case regarding this issue. Do you think it is worth looking into? And a user in the comments said, did you have an employment contract that they somehow invalidated? If not, they can fire you for whatever reason they want or no reason except for specific discriminatory reasons. A looming potential of a bonus is not a contract that promises you your job. And guys, I gotta say, I am kind of surprised hearing that supposedly in the US an employer can fire you for whatever reason they want or just give no reason at all. Is this even true? It seems like BS if you ask me. And the next one is an update to the promised bonus and then fired story. I have decided to go for it and I am asking for a critique of the certified letter I will send tomorrow. Indiana. It is a $100 bet in small court I am willing to make if it goes to that. What do you all think? I substituted a few things of anonymity. I appreciate any feedback. Dear Mrs. Karen and whom it may concern, I am formally requesting the payments which were offered to me in exchange for my continuation of employment at A-Holes Inc. this year. On May 2016, you alluded to this compensation, and on June 2016 you specified that I would receive $3,200 if A-Hole Village passed its inspections with a score of at least 90% or $2,000 if the score was at least 85%. You also offered to prorate my annual bonus to the end of my employment with A-Holes Inc. based on the previous year amount of $4,600 if I would continue in my position through the sale of the property. The prorated bonus to the end of my employment, September 14th, the 258th day of a year of 366 days, is $3,242. I have received legal advice that assures me that the agreement discussed on May 2016 and made on June 2016 does constitute as a contract and it is enforceable in a court of law. I am demanding the money owed to me of $3,200 for the inspection compensation and $3,242 for my annual bonus. This totals around $6,442. If this is not agreed upon within 10 days, I am prepared to file suit in the County Superior 9000 Court for a judgment of the above, plus court costs on the morning of October 4th. Thank you for your cooperation in this matter. Please don't hesitate to discuss further with me. However, I do ask that all future communication be made in writing. And a user in the comments said, it looks good, however I would change if this is not agreed upon to something along the lines of, if I do not receive X amount by then, I will file in court. If this is a larger company with legal counsel, I would address the letter to them. And guys, I'm curious to hear what you think about this situation. What would you have done? Would you have written a similar letter? Let us know in the comments. And if you have watched until here, please don't forget to post some star emojis in the comments and also like the video if you want to support me. Thank you very much in advance. And now the conclusion to the promised bonus story. With the action date in my letter looming and no response, I emailed my former boss letting them know that I would be filing in court at noon the next day if I had heard no response, like my letter had stated. I printed out the summons and filled it out, made copies of a few things that would be in the packet if I filed. The next morning, first thing she replied that they intended to pay up everything I had asked for, that they did not know the score on the inspection yet and could cut the check for the prorated bonus and the smaller inspection bonus and then give me the remainder if the score came back above 90. I replied that, with the score possibly being quite close to this mark, it would be reasonable to conclude that if the score is below 90%, the small difference of the margin would have been met if my employment had been continued through the inspection. She never replied to that. Instead, the payroll person emailed me the next day confirming my address for her to send a check. And last week I received a check for the full amount minus all those damn taxes and my automatic 401k contribution. Unemployment was approved, no issues, and I had a job interview today that went really well. Too long didn't read, I was promised a bonus, fired right before I would have earned it, wrote them a mean letter, they rolled over and paid it. And guys, that once again shows that you just have to stand up for your rights, even though sometimes it might seem that it would be pointless. Slight little trigger warning for the next one because it deals with some very serious topics including assault, so either way, this one is titled "Maliciously accused of assaulting my daughter by two angry relatives, have evidence in our favor, but police believe them because of dad's non-sexual criminal and mental health history." My wife and I stopped my overweight 3-year-old daughter from visiting my mother unsupervised and forbid her from seeing my aunt Berta altogether because they would not stop giving her sodas to drink pretty much. They called CPS and accused us of a long list of things, assault included. And by the way, in case you're not reading along, I'm just saying assault, but actually there is a different word, but I cannot say that one on YouTube without getting demonetized. On September 20th, Child Protective Services questioned us, including my daughter. We gave them full roam of our home and answered their questions honestly, though I was not polite. I did not believe my mom was involved and even told them to go talk to my mom, thinking she would tell them the truth. As soon as they left, I called my mom to tell her what had happened. I could tell from her responses that she was in on it. According to my wife's mother, Berta made an almost illegible Facebook post around the time we had a falling out about the sodas that said something about being called a very bad word and said CPS would take care of it. My mom sent a message to my wife's sister on August 12th that says, "Please ignore Bertha, she has taken too many pills and talking stupidly." They told CPS a long list of accusations, none of them true. They told them I am assaulting my daughter, that we never take her to the doctor and dentist records prove otherwise, that my wife has Stockholm Syndrome, my daughter jumps at loud noises, that my daughter has no friends, that she is not in any daycare or Head Start programs, among others. I've been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and bipolar before, and they are using that against me with the Stockholm Syndrome thing. I resent having my family called a hostage situation. Now my wife has a voicemail from a detective at the local police department that says that I have to come in a talk face to face. I looked up his name and he is a crimes against children detective. I'm going to talk to a lawyer on Monday morning before I talk to the detective, but I only have a few $100s. I am an ex-con with a 2005 drug felony from Florida. I have a domestic violence charge with my wife as victim from 2013 before our daughter was born. I have 2 domestic violence charges from over 15 years ago when I was 18. I have a few other misdemeanors that are pre-2008. None of my charges are remotely sex-related. I have received a disability check for bipolar disorder since I was a teenager. I look bad on paper and maybe bad in person. I've integrated into society quite a bit since the birth of my daughter. I fear I am being scrutinized and suspected because of my psychiatric diagnosis. How can I convince them that I would never hurt my own daughter? Update: I now have a printout of a paste of a message Berta sent to my wife's mother that reads like this. I am here for my daughter. I missed a family gathering yesterday because this guy loves to go and cuss his own mother and make everyone me cereals. Please don't think that my daughter is the only one. I am going to child services next week. Pray for the best. Not cereals, no more messages, let child services take care of it. I've been called worse than that, I don't count, my mom does not count, child services will sort it out, and I am very sorry I bothered you. Update number 2, we spoke to a lawyer today and gave him copies of the messages Bertas sent to my wife's family, as well as one my mother sent around the same time mentioning that Berta was abusing her medication. He said he would call DHS's attorney and try to find out what is going on, and that I should offer to set up a meeting in the lawyer's office if the detective called me back. Berta also called him after she received the no-contact letter, accused him of being a mail drop and not a real lawyer, and stated her intention to contact the Social Security Administration and tell them that I am not really disabled. My attorney told me to contact SSA and give them a heads up. Is there anything else I can do about that? So a person in the comments said, yeah, it's time for an attorney. Keep the evidence you have that Berta is making false accusations. CPS is pretty good at figuring out when an allegation is bullplop. Being cooperative and honest with CPS will go well. But please talk to an attorney as soon as possible. And guys, I gotta say, obviously this guy does not have a white vest or something, but still, I would say if you have a family like that, you don't really need enemies. What would you have done in this situation to essentially clear your name if you were the OP? Let us know in the comments. The next one is titled, Update, CPS determined Berta's assault allegations are unsubstantiated, but Berta is not finished yet. After 45 days we received letters from CPS stating the allegations were unsubstantiated. I had an attorney send them both no-contact letters. Berta called the office upon receiving her letter and left a voicemail accusing him of only being a mail drop and threatening to call the Social Security Administration and tell them that I am not disabled. I've gotten SSDI since I was a kid. My mother showed up at our house a few weeks ago and said the letter was just a piece of paper. When I threatened to call the cops, she held up her phone and said something to the effect of, well, you just hit me. She was sitting in her vehicle yelling at me through a window rolled down a few inches the whole time, and I never left my doorstep or came within arm's reach of her truck or her. I immediately called 911. They told me it was not a 911 matter, so I went to the police station and made an harassment report. I took a copy of the report along with other evidence, including Facebook posts and messages, the voicemail to the lawyer, and the unsubstantiated CPS allegations to the city attorney, and I have asked to file charges against them both. Thanks to everyone who helped out so far. Update, in today's mail I got a letter from the city attorney telling me to call the police if my mother contacted my family anymore, as well as a copy of a letter he sent to her telling her that she could be charged with harassment if she contacted us anymore. Well guys, I wouldn't say that's really a happy ending, but at least it led to something. Makes you really wonder why this guy's own family hates him so much. But unfortunately it seems this was basically the last update, so that is as far as we can get. And the next one was posted by user Loken89 on our own subreddit r/ripe stories, and it has nothing to do with legal advice. However, it is a very interesting military related malicious compliance story. It is titled, Secure it but leave the keys in it. Roger that, Lieutenant. This happened back in my army days on deployment to Afghanistan. I was an E4 despite being in for around 7 years at this point because I decided to self-medicate for a while before seeking help for PTSD and was a bit of a fixture in my unit after spending my entire army career in this unit. Despite my screw-ups, I was well liked by most of my unit and especially by my CO, company commander, and 1SG, first sergeant, the enlisted counterpart to the CO. I was what the army calls a deployment soldier, someone who you love to have in your unit while deployed, but gets a bit, let's say, distracted and has a tendency to get in a bit of trouble when back in garrison or the US for too long. I was known for being sarcastic, a jokester and hardworking when it mattered, but tended to be the typical long-term E4 when it came to bullcrap duties in garrison, for instance taking a 3-month staycation when our base defense duty, but that is a story for another time. Also important to the story, I was also known for rarely being seen without my best friend Jay, who I went to basic with and was lucky enough to be in the same unit my entire career, and if we were left without supervision for too long, well, leadership knew not to let that happen. Consequences could range from the time the entirety of the barracks living members of the company missed PT the day after St. Patrick's Day, due to the 3-story beer bong monstrosity we created to, well, the story. I had recently been switched to OPS, operations. Basically, they put me behind a desk to be the armorer, guy that makes the pew-pews go pew again when they stop pewing. From the front line, despite having no training and definitely not the best person for the job. This led to me being the lone person on the night shift, as troops tend to take very good care of their weapons when downrange, and if something does break it usually has to go to battalion armorers, the guys that were actually trained to fix them, so honestly there was not much for me to do. I won't get into all my duties, but it was not much, it was not hard, and I was bored. Cute side note, the best nights were when the mine dog assigned to us could not sleep and came to the TOC, Tactical Operations Center, and I got to play with her most of the night. Back to the story, before I was switched, Jay was in the lead vehicle which hit an IED. He was med-evac'd out on a chopper, but luckily himself and 2 others were concussed and beaten up, but otherwise okay, RIP to the driver sadly. He was only 19 and was placed on life support, but it was removed at the request of his parents less than 24 hours later. Anyway, Jay came back to the unit, but leadership was wary of sending him back on mission too soon, and he was placed on night shift with me. To this day, even the CO and his PL, platoon leader, usually a second lieutenant aka Butterbar, cannot explain why they thought putting him and me together on night shift unsupervised for 12 hours a night was a good idea. With both of us being well liked and in our specific company for longer than anyone else there, we got pretty brave, and there were quite a few antics and pranks pulled on the company leadership, most of which were tolerated and laughed about, and I can go into detail later if anyone is interested. And yes, by the way, we are very interested. This antic, however, was not loved by the officers, not at all. While deployed, military cooks serve midnight chow, which is exactly what it sounds like. Since we were on a larger base this time around, our unit was issued a Gator. Think electric golf, except where the rear seat and club holders would be, there is a small dump truck bed. We would use this to drive to pick up midnight chow and drive back, and sometimes other members of the unit would use it for work or just to avoid taking the buses on base. Well, one particular morning a group of lower enlisted took it to the gym and stayed longer than usual, and when the officers woke up they wanted to go get breakfast, and only to find that they had to use the bus because the Gator was gone. Jay and I were berated and told that we were not supposed to let anyone below a platoon sergeant rank use the Gator. First we had heard of this rule, but whatever, this happens all the time in the army, adjust and move on. Since we were ops, we were still allowed Gator use, so we did not care. That is until one morning I left shift with the Gator keys still in my pocket, and they could not find them or use the Gator until I showed up for my next shift. Thus ends the Gator use for anyone but the first sergeant, who never used it anyway, the CO and the XO, second in command to the CO on the officer side, usually a first lieutenant, but in this case a butterbar. Our exact orders were, "The keys stay in the Gator and no one uses it without our permission," and I was told off pretty harshly by the XO. Usually you can get away with a bit of argument with a butterbar, the good ones anyway, after you've been in the military for a while, and this XO really was a good one. I guess he was just having a bad day or something, I don't know, but I knew better than to press my luck and argue. There's more than one way to break in a new lieutenant after all. So now we finally come to the malicious compliance. Jay and I were fairly annoyed with the XO's actions, and since we had nothing better to do that night, and I sure as hell was not gonna let him think his rank allows him to not give people decent human respect, we spent the first few hours thinking of how to teach him a lesson. Knowing the CO had left to the brigade headquarters earlier that day, we came to the conclusion that since we could not bring the key inside anymore, but still needed to secure the Gator, we would need to get creative. That night we decided that since we had to be inside and could not have eyes on it, we would need to hide it or at least place it out of reach. Outside on a smoke break, we saw the connexes, or railroad containers for civilian speak. They were stacked too high, with empties on top and extra supplies on the bottom. We looked at each other and immediately knew what to do. We took turns building a makeshift ramp that night and slowly eased the Gator up to the top of one of the stacks, turned it off, left the keys in and disassembled the ramp. Luckily we left before the XO woke up and the first sergeant did not notice it was missing since he never used it. Getting back that night, we were a bit nervous, but when we walked in, the first sergeant tried hard to hide a smile. We knew we were in the clear then. Sure enough, the XO comes to us with a red face. XO:
What the hell was that?
Us: What was what, sir?
Don't give me that crap, the Gator.
Us: Well, sir, you said we had to keep the Gator secure from anyone without your permission, but we have to stay inside and could not see it. Since we had to leave the keys in it as well and did not have any guidance, we thought the best thing would be to put it where no one can reach it. This is the point the first sergeant breaks down laughing and the XO knows nothing will happen to us, so he says,
Okay, that was good. You had your fun, but don't put it up there again.
Us: Roger, sir. We later found out they used a crane from the contractors to get it down, probably for the best. No one got hurt that way. Still under the same orders with one caveat and inspired by the crane usage, that night I took a trip to the contractors and after explaining the situation to them, they happily agreed to use the crane to move a barrier from our mortar bunker out of the way long enough for us to fit the Gator in and then replaced it. There was physically no way to get it out without a crane. Things happened much the same that night, except this time we had new orders that we were not to hide the Gator at all. The first sergeant stayed behind that night for a few smokes with Jay and I, laughing but telling us he cannot protect us forever, but he was interested in seeing how it all plays out, so he would not stop us from continuing, but tread carefully. We thanked him and quickly came up with our new plan, but this time waited until about 3 AM, thinking the XO may have a surprise visit. Sure enough, around 1 we saw a red flashlight beam shine on the Gator during a smoke break, and while we cannot prove it was the XO, we assume it was. Around 3 we began unscrewing the entire front wall of the TOC, drove the Gator inside and replaced the wall. That morning the XO unexpectedly arrives with the first sergeant before we were off shift. The first sergeant walks in and laughs so hard he cannot breathe. Hearing a loud outside the door, the XO enters, stares at our work and walks out head down without saying a word. This time the first sergeant made us undo our work since it would interfere with operations, and later that night the XO told us we had made our point and we even got an apology. After that anyone could use the Gator as long as it was back by breakfast, and the CO had one hell of a laugh when he returned. And guys, I gotta say, that story was absolutely glorious. I wish we had more of these military-related malicious compliance stories. And Loken89, thank you very much for posting this story. If you have more, please share it. I would be very happy to read, as you write very well. Either way guys, unfortunately we have reached the end of the video for today. If you are subscribed already, please don't forget to also click the bell icon to not miss any of my videos in case YouTube decides to screw up again. Either way, I hope you have a fantastic day and I see you again tomorrow.